Today, we reflect on one of the attitudes that Jesus often reacted about very strongly. And I call it presumptuousness. The gospel writer tells us that the ones who presented themselves as family or close relatives to Jesus wanted to talk to him. But take note of what they did. Instead of entering the house where Jesus was, they stood outside while they expected him to come out and to meet with them. Meaning, not only did they expect special treatment from Jesus because they were close relations, they did not want to mingle with the people who were with him inside the house. You know, of course, how controversial Jesus had become because of the kind of people he socialized with. He was not very choosy with his company. Many of them were the kind of people who were looked down upon in Jewish society, those who were called unclean or impure or sinners. There were tax collectors among them. There were some rebels and some prostitutes or even lepers and beggars. Maybe the closest equivalent would be the people regarded in Indian society as the untouchables, especially by those who think of themselves as belonging to a higher class of human beings. Remember the caste system whose abolition Mahatma Gandhi strongly advocated. You know what people found most radical about Jesus' behavior was his non-discriminatory attitude towards people. He did not even seem to care very much about his reputation in regard to the kind of people he circulated with. By the way, this passage which we read from Matthew has a context in the parallel in the Gospel of Mark. Mark chapter 3. In Mark chapter 3, verse 21, just a few verses before the parallel about the standing outside passage, we are told that word had gotten around that Jesus was not eating anymore because he had become too engrossed with his mission. Mark tells us that his relatives set out to take him by force back to Nazareth because they thought that he was already out of his mind. Nababaliw na. Reading between the lines, I suspect that they even brought along his mother so that they could pressure him to submit to his wishes, to their wishes. They probably felt that the kind of company that he was keeping was bringing dishonor to the family. Although I am sure Mary did not feel that way herself about Jesus. We have another kind or another version of this kind of presumptuousness in the Jewish reference to themselves as children of Abraham. We are children of Abraham. You remember that scene when the Sadducees and the Pharisees were also coming to John the Baptist in order to be baptized, and John said to them, bluntly, he said, "Do not presume to say to yourselves, we have Abraham as our father. I tell you, God can raise up children to Abraham even from these stones." Or you remember that Roman centurion who impressed Jesus with his deep faith. He's a Gentile, and Jesus found a deep faith in him. And how Jesus said, "Many will come from the east and the west," meaning people who are not necessarily Jewish. And they will recline with Abraham, with Isaac, and Jacob at the banquet of the kingdom of heaven. But, he said, the children of the kingdom will be left out in the darkness outside. That's Matthew chapter 8, verse 11. They might even knock at the door desperately and cry out, Lord, Lord, open the door for us. We ate and drank with you. We were in your company. Remember? But the text says, the Lord will say to them, I do not know you. Depart from me. Jesus often communicated this very strong warning to those who tended to exclude others and presumed rather arrogantly that only they will be saved. How they might find themselves being the ones excluded in the end. You know, we also have that interesting parable in Luke chapter 16, where it is not the man of high stature in society, but the excluded poor beggar whose name is Lazarus, who will end up in the bosom of Abraham. In our own Christian setting, especially in our parishes, we know how close co-workers in the parish would usually refer to one another as brother, sister, brother so-and-so, sister so-and-so. But I would be surprised if they would also refer to those who don't come regularly to the parish as brothers and sisters. It is easy for those who frequent the church to become presumptuous about being close to God or being close to the gates of heaven over against those who are far away from the church. I hear that lately Pope Francis issued some instructions to the parishes. I think he is challenging the parishes to outgrow the tendency to become exclusive and parochialistic in the negative sense of the word. To be more open and more mission-oriented and more inclusive. And so Jesus turned the tables on his relatives when he said to them, who is family to me? Who is my brother and my sister and my mother? Without intending to insult any of them, he points at those gathered around him. And he said, here they are. It is those who do the will of my Father in heaven who are brother and sister and mother to me. Actually, I do not think he said this to disown his relatives who were standing outside. Brothers and sisters, there, I use the term. If we apply this to ourselves, I would say Jesus is merely inviting us to please widen our notion of family to include even those whom we might not be related to by blood or by religion or by whatever association or affinity. Yes, it is true what they say, charity begins at home. We all believe that. Charity begins at home. But it should not end at home. Can you still call it charity if you can do it only at home? If we cannot extend it to those we're not related to by blood? If we cannot consider the last, the least, and the lost in society? as also members of God's family. Do not forget, in Matthew 25, we are told that at the Last Judgment, the judge will not ask us about our piety or about the number of times we prayed or went to church or attended Mass. He will rather declare, whatsoever you did for the least of my brothers and sisters, you did for me.